Alrighty, welcome to the Newcastle Coders Group for June. Thank you for braving the cold weather and for not going to watch the State of Origin, which apparently is on tonight and I had no idea. I'll kick off by just acknowledging that we are meeting in the lands of the Awabakal and Warramai people, and I'd like to pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. We'd like you to connect with the Newcastle Coders Group. We're on our website, ncg.asn.au, where you can send us a message about anything you'd like. Find us on Twitter, which I check very, very occasionally. And of course, Newey Slack is the best spot to get in contact with us. So if you're not in the Newey Slack, go to newey.com, request an invite, and it'll send me an email, and then I'll add you in. If you did request an invite during the New conference and didn't get added in, you probably were one of the people who ended up in the bucket where we went over our free plan limit. So ask again. That's not our sponsors, we'll skip that. Our sponsors today are SSW, V2, two other consultancies that aren't on that previous slide, and of course Safi Engineering, who were on that previous slide. So thank you to our sponsors. Without them, we can't put this on for free, and I don't want to go back to the days where I have to ask everybody to throw in $5 for pizza so that we can have something to eat. We would like you to speak, sponsor, host or help. So we're always looking for more people to help us out with organising, finding speakers, turning up on the day, putting out drinks, putting them away, and just talking to people in general. I would like somebody to host it. SSW are great for hosting, Mudbath are great for hosting, but we want to showcase everyone in Newcastle. So if you've got a great office you'd like us to turn up in, come and have a chat. And we're always looking for people to speak. So whether that's 5 minutes or 50, whether it's your first talk or your 100th, we'd love you to come along and have a chat about anything at all related to tech. We've had talks from HR to building a synthesizer using floppy disk drives, all the way through to everything you could possibly ever do in Azure. So all areas. And if you've just got ideas, if you have things that you think could make us better, if you have events you think we should run, reach out and say hi. Tonight we've got Mark Tranter talking about AWS Project Development Kit, maybe live coding, maybe not live coding, we'll find out when we get to it, and myself talking about my experiences with mob programming. Next month we have Stephen G, who will be talking about Rust and WASM and teaching kids and all sorts of good things. We're back down at Mudbath for that one, and then the month after we're back here with, I think, Adam Coden talking about AI, wherever AI is up to then, if it hasn't become our new overlord. Of course, I say this every time, but we're all weird meat sacks walking around this planet. Be nice to each other. We all spend a little bit too much time at home, a little bit too much time not talking to people. So remember to open up your conversations, invite people in and be friendly. We will be having pizza. It's just taking a little bit longer. Everyone's ordered from Uber Eats before, I assume, and knows how these sort of things go. Seth's put in the order. He put in the order with lots of time. It was going to be here at 6. It's now 6:35, and in theory, it's in a car somewhere. So we'll find out. While you are here, if you do have any issues, we do have a code of conduct, and you can come and talk to any of the organisers who are here. Unfortunately, that's just me today. But if you do have a problem, come and have a chat to me and we'll try and sort it out. So on to tech news.
I've got some AI stuff in here, but I thought I'd kick it off with some GitHub stuff. So GitHub Actions, you can now run your workflows on ARM processors. You could use the Mac OS runners and use the M1 chips, but this is just generic ARM64. And I think the kicker on this is that it's actually the cheapest of the runners. So they're running it a little bit cheaper. So if you want to build some ARM native things, you've got ARM64 runners for that. GitHub also announced some Copilot extensions. Anyone use GitHub Copilot? Most people? Anyone scared of using Copilot in their job? No one. Cool. So the Copilot extensions I think are really cool because it hooks up into other data sources, so you can then query there's an Octopus Copilot extension, so you can then ask it about your deployments, and you can still stay within your VS Code. Anyone thinks this type of stuff is cool? Yeah, awesome. Microsoft had a build conference and they announced a whole bunch of stuff. The coolest thing on there is that they made .NET Aspire GA. So .NET Aspire is a stack for orchestrating distributed applications, and then you codify all how all your bits talk together, and you can then deploy it out to Azure, AWS, or Kubernetes. I think it's cool. I did a talk about it last month for the .NET user group, and I did a talk at /new. So if you missed that, it's on you. We've got an older version of the talk on YouTube that you can check out. And I think it's a cool tech, and it's not just limited to Microsoft stuff. So it works with npm and Python and a whole bunch of stuff, any Docker containers. So I like that. Speaking of Microsoft again, Edge recently hit its all-time high on browser usage. It's now number 2, so it's just pipped Safari. Anyone use Edge? Some people. It's just it's Chromium based. It does it's just a little bit different. So that's pretty interesting. AI news. Okay, so XAI. Recently got Series B funding of $6 billion, billion with a B. That's crazy money. So they're investing in that. It'll be really interesting to see what comes out of there, because from what I understand, the model itself is only about at GPT 3.5 sort of levels, but it's got all the Twitter data. So it'll be interesting what they do with that one. Google and AI. And did anyone see this? So Google was pumping out some AI-based search results. And if you go down here, there's a thing about homemade pizza. You assemble the pie, throw it in the oven, but it's oily and the cheese falls right off. So you ask Google for a solution. Google suggested to add some glue. Mix about 1/8 of a cup of Elmer's glue in with the sauce. Non-toxic glue will work. So that's an awesome suggestion, and thankfully they've pulled it. They're dropping that down because it's coming. Why would you add glue? Seriously.
It's the fear of adding AI to a customer-facing product, right? It can say anything.
Yeah.
And you're blamed for it. We had some news a few months ago.
At the same time, though, they're all like when they do photography of food, they usually do spray glue and things like that to make it look picture perfect. And I'm wondering if it's taking that information to make it look.
I hadn't thought about that. That's a good reason why it might be, but
yeah,
doesn't.
It most probably got it from a legitimate place, but yeah, I don't know. Again, AI. So this is a TED a podcast, the TED AI show, and they spoke with Helen Toner. Now I think she's from Melbourne. She was on the board for OpenAI when Sam Altman was fired, and she talks about that in this podcast. So that would be really interesting.
Still not heaps of information there about exactly what was going on. A lot of this.
I think you only ever get half the story from half the side, and
even then, there's so much corporate shenanigans at play here. Very interested to see what it all looks like, really.
It would be really interesting to be a fly on the wall, and it's crazy money going into AI. Like, what was it, that latest chip that NVIDIA shipped, and it was $100 billion or something of R&D went into a chip, but it's going to power whatever the next generation of AI stuff is. So there's going to be documentaries made about this whole thing for sure later on. To less AI news, ReactConf happened recently. Any React developers? Yes? Cool. So React got a compiler, which is really cool. React 19 went from beta to RC. You can pull it down. It's got a whole bunch of stuff. I think the the coolest thing on there is, improving hydration. That's always the thing that gets me. React Native got a new architecture, and they improved the build time just slightly on this one from 10 plus minutes to 32 seconds. So only incremental improvements. React Server Components and Expo Router, Remix and React Router have always had this funny relationship. The Remix team have just gone, hey, it's just React Router, just to make it simple. So that was really cool. At similar time, Next had a conference as well. It's conference season. So Next 15 will support React 19. Which is going to be interesting. The cool thing here is this next after experimental component. So you can actually write code that runs after a render. So you can improve. I mean, it's all about web vitals and improving performance. So that was really interesting. And the Vercel has this V0 product, which is generative AI for UI. And they released an SDK for it. And one of the cool things down here is you can actually stream components back, so as part of the render. So if we go down, there's this demo here. Somebody says, what's the weather in San Francisco? And it's streamed back a component, and that's all done through generative AI. I think that's really cool. And you can try the demo and go with it. Microsoft, I said before, they had a conference. So this is an improvement they're making to Windows. Any Windows users in the house? Some? Yes? About half? Cool. So File Explorer is getting version control, so it's getting native Git support and 7-zip compression support and a whole bunch of stuff, which is awesome. The other thing that they shipped is this thing called Windows Recall. So if you've got one of those new Copilot Plus devices, it can then take screenshots of your computer throughout the day, and then you can ask it, hey, what was I doing earlier in the day? And it knows because it's got the screenshots. And that's been quite not well received as a security risk. So, I mean, all the stuff is in your app data folder. It is, petitioned off, but I don't know. A lot of people are flagging it as security risks, so I don't know what's going to happen with that. But AI is not all doom and gloom. If you're like me and you've got kids that play Minecraft and you have no idea how to play Minecraft, they've actually, you can actually interact with it live. So there's this cool demo here where it's using Copilot while someone's playing Minecraft. Hopefully we have sound.
Hey, Copilot, how's it going?
Hey, it looks like you're about to dive into some Minecraft.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to make a sword.
To craft a sword, you'll need some materials. Can you open your inventory? Just press E on your keyboard. You've got some sticks, perfect for the sword's handle, but it looks like you're missing the material for the blade. Let's start by gathering some wood or stone. Shall we head out and find some resources?
Yeah, that sounds great.
So that's live, real-time AI. It's pretty cool. And I mean, if they can do that while you're playing Minecraft, you can do that while doing other things. So it gets, taking in more context. That's all the news I've got. Anyone else have some interesting news? No?
Alrighty, thanks for sticking around to hear me waffle. All right, so I'm going to kick this off with a question. Have you ever seen a sprint board, a Kanban board, etc.? It looks a little bit like this. You've got a whole bunch of stuff piling up in review and in progress, but you're making good progress. Everything's out of the to-do column. You're getting all your work in progress. You get it going along. Everyone's making good time. Everyone's busy, and things are starting to pile up in the review column and the in progress column. Maybe you've seen a burn down chart that looks a little bit like this. You start out your sprint, everyone's excited on Tuesday, you're going well, you've got good progress going. Then you get to Friday and, it's Friday. Then the weekend hits in and all of a sudden things are plateauing. So on Monday, everyone gets together and they go for a bit of a burst again. And then once again, everything sort of peters out. And then at the end of the sprint, you've got about half of the work done that you intended to get done. I've seen this sprint board. I've seen this burn down chart. I've seen them over and over and over again. And I am Klee Thomas. I'm a software developer at Atlassian by day, and by night I organise the Newcastle Coders Group. I was part of the organising committee for the /new conference. Yeah, everyone loves /new. Everyone should come again next year. Hopefully it's going to go ahead. Everyone should get their companies to sponsor it next year. But I'm also very, very strongly opinionated about agile and software development practices in general. They're sort of one of my passion areas. But I want to talk about you and your team. I am going to make the assumption for this talk that everyone here works on a team full of great people. No, never am I going to assume that you're working with people who aren't capable or aren't fantastic software developers. I'm going to assume that through this whole talk, you're all following best practices. I'm going to go so far as to think that every one of you does test-driven development. I know you don't, but I'm going to assume that you do. I'm going to assume that everyone has version control in place. Everyone uses short-lived branches, so there's no one sitting there with a 6-month-old feature branch waiting to get it merged in. I'm going to assume that you use continuous integration and that you're using something like pull request green build, so that in order to get everything into production, you've got to get things through that pull request cycle and that your builds are green. I'm assuming you're using continuous delivery, so as soon as things hit that main branch, they're out to production. So I'm assuming that you're doing the best you possibly can as a software developer. So nothing in here is to say that you or your teams aren't fantastic. So I'm going to assume that your work looks like this. You get into work and you pick up a task. You move that task in Jira, Monday, in Trello, maybe it's on Notion, maybe it's just sticky notes on a wall. However it is that you manage your work, I'm going to assume you pick up that task and you move it over to in progress. You're then going to go to Git. You're going to branch that code base. You're going to make some changes. But of course, I've got this in the wrong order because you're all doing test-driven development, so you're writing your tests first. And then you're going to make those changes. You're going to push it. It's all going to be great up there. You're going to open a pull request. You're going to ask for a review. Caleb here is going to look at it. Well, it's going to do build there. Another dev, Caleb here, is going to go and have a look. And he's going to say, all right, that looks really good. Or, why did you do it this way? Why did you get this bit done here? Or you missed this feature maybe. And then those questions are going to be reviewed, addressed, and merged in. And then you're going to do this. You're going to move to done, and this is going to happen for all of the developers in your team. So however many people are in your team, you're going to go through this process, and it's going to work pretty well. You're getting good work done. Again, you have fantastic developers. You're actually delivering good value. But if I was to restructure that same flow and show it here laid out a little differently, we're going to assume we have a team of 2 developers because that fits nicely on my board. Our developers are going to be very ingenuously named S and J for our senior and junior developer. Our senior developer is going to come in, they're going to pick up a task. The junior developer is going to pick up their task, and you're both going to get some work done. Junior takes a little bit longer because they're starting out, they're learning, that's normal. When the senior's done, they're going to push that task over and say, can you review this? And then they're going to pick up the next task. The junior will finish their task, look at it, throw it over to the senior, and then look at this pull request, say, that's all good, senior did it, I didn't even bother reading it. The senior is then going to finish up, they're going to pick up task 4, the senior is going to finish up on task 3, it's going to go over to the junior's queue, because that's what we're doing here, we're building up a queue of work to be done. Now, the junior's pull request is going to have a couple of things they need to fix, like, can you add a test here, let's tidy up this little bit, can you use better variable names because X and Y aren't really very good, and task 5 is going to be picked up. Now, all of our work is in progress, we've finished one thing. We're going to go through the cycle a bit more now. Task 4 is going to go for review, task 3 is going to go back for changes, task 5 goes over for review, task 2 goes back for more changes, task 4 goes over for changes, finally task 5 is done. Task 3 is back for changes, task 2, and so on. We get a couple of little bits of time in there to do some self-learning, but at the end of our sprint, everything's done, everyone's looking good. But that's pretty complicated, and it gets worse. When the reality steps in, partway through task 2 here, junior is going to get blocked. So they're going to interrupt the senior, but the senior can't pick it up straight away. And so they're going to pull in more work because that's what they do. Everyone should be busy all the time. At some point, the senior's also going to get blocked, but they're blocked by somebody outside of the team. So while they're waiting, they pull in more work. And so now at the end of our week, we've still got work in progress. All of that time's been eaten up, all by a couple of little blockages. So this is all a bit painful, and it all scales out worse. When we look at this here, this is with 2 people. If we have a team of 3, 5, 9, Scrum says 6 plus or minus 3, so 9 is a reasonable team size in a Scrum team. We're going to have lines going all over the place, things pushing back and forward, and all this is assuming you only need 1 pull request in order to merge to production. So you've got to scale it out to your team, your size, your process, and at some point it's going to get painful. You have to ask yourself, what are you optimizing for in this case? You're probably optimizing for 100% utilization. And I would ask you to stop that. Stop thinking about optimizing for utilization, start thinking about optimizing for done. Because it just needs a pull request. That's the statement I've heard in so many stand-ups. That's not done. That's not value delivered to your customers. It just needs testing. I've heard that in so many stand-ups. That's not value. That's not done. Anything that you've got currently sitting as work in progress is value you haven't delivered to your customer. So how do we get it right the first time? How do we get rid of all those red and yellow boxes? We can just have less questions. Everyone gets to ask only 1 question on a PR. Maybe that'll answer it. Maybe we just get better developers. We'll throw out the ones we've got now. They're terrible, and get better developers. But as I said, I'm assuming you've got good developers. We could just get rid of junior developers. They seem to be causing all the problems back there, right? We'll just not have junior developers. We'll only hire seniors. Tell me that you've never heard that before. And maybe we could just do it right the first time. None of these are really complete options, right? No bugs-driven development would be great, but it doesn't exist. What I'm going to ask you to do is actually instead think about shifting left. We've talked before about shifting security left, saying, oh, let's do this at the start of the process. We've talked before about let's do quality first, so move testing to the start of the process. Maybe we should move pull request to the start of the process, move pull request into an early part of our process rather than pushing it out at the end, rather than building those queues out over and over again. That's where we can start optimizing for done rather than just optimizing for being busy. And this is where we can talk about ensemble or mob programming. So ensemble programming or mob programming, some people don't like the word mob, some people like the word ensemble instead. I like either, but it's the whole team working on a single task, on a single computer at a time. One person is going to drive, they're just typing. The driver being the person who has the least power is a bit of an odd statement, but I think of it a little bit like rally car driving. I'm not a big motorsport fan, but what I see is a navigator sitting there in the passenger seat saying, turn left up here, sharp, turn left up here, slightly. And the driver just does what they're told. And that's what the rest of the team are doing. They're navigating. They're all sitting around saying, how can we approach this problem? How can we decide where we're going? And they tell the driver what to do. The rest of the team are in control. Because that driver is in such a low control position, they're rotated regularly. And it's really at this core here, one task per group. That's the way that we start to get more done. We do less in order to get more done, and it's really coming back to over-optimizing on the Kanban ideas of limiting work in progress in order to get more done. There's a range of advantages here. My first and favorite one is lower lottery factor. So some people call it bus factor. I like to think that maybe some people actually win the lottery instead of getting hit by buses, but I've been in spots before where work didn't get done when I was away. And that's a bad thing because I ride a motorcycle. So at any point in time, I could not come to work the next day. One day, I wasn't riding the motorcycle, but I just had a medical condition. I went out of the work for 3 months, overnight, and things had to go on without me. By doing this sort of thing, you're limiting that chance of people ever having that single point of failure. You get better collaboration and better collective code ownership. So More people feel comfortable working on more parts of the code because more people have worked on those parts of the code before. You don't have that bit that's just Caleb's bit. Oh, we need that fixed, we've got to go to Caleb. Want that other bit fixed, we've got to go to Matt. No, everyone owns all the code all the time, and everyone can work on it. Everyone can pick up any task and run with it. The team ends up more engaged because you're delivering work more often. Rather than sitting around and saying, okay, yeah, I haven't delivered anything in a month, your team is constantly delivering, your team is constantly working together, and you're actually getting more work done. It sounds counterintuitive to say, we're going to do less work and get more done, but that was absolutely my experience. If you go back and have a look at this again, you can see here I've put a burn down chart over the top of this. So everything gets delivered by Friday, that's fantastic. We deliver on Tuesday, we then deliver twice on Thursday, we deliver twice on Friday. Everything gets done. If we have a look at this in a more of a mob programming model, so now S and J are working together, they do task 1, they pick it up, they work on it till it's complete. They then pick up task 2, they work on it till it's complete. Task 3 till it's complete, task 4 till it's complete, task 5 till it's complete, and we're still finishing up on Friday, it's finishing about the same time. But if we look at our burn down chart, we're delivering value on Monday, we're delivering value on Tuesday, we're delivering value on Wednesday, we deliver value on Thursday, we deliver value on Friday. Rather than waiting all week to get everything done, we're delivering value regularly. And this means if you're working in an environment where you're getting customer feedback and after task 2 is complete, you decide you need to make a pivot. In this model, you're doing that on Tuesday. In this model, you're doing that on Thursday. You can immediately start actually acting on the work you've done sooner, pivoting, changing, and just having people use it. Which means if you find a production bug, you can find it on Tuesday rather than finding it on Thursday. And of course, we put padding in before for that junior because they were doing a bit of extra work, taking a little bit longer to learn. But now, all that's been shifted left. We could potentially cut that down, actually finish up everything on Thursday. That's not quite sure why that's in there. But let's dig into my experiences actually working this model. So I've worked in 2 teams where we did this as our primary method of getting work done. And there's some good bits and bad bits, but how we did it. First of all, I've only done this remotely. My teams are spread up and down the east coast of Australia, which means we come together twice a year. We can't sit in a room and do all this as our full-time way of working. We had to do it remotely. When I started out, we did some initial training. We did that with Woody Zool, who's known as the father of mob programming. That was very fortunate, but it was just lucky that our company had a relationship with him at the time, so he could sit with us and do some work with us. When he did mob programming, he did it all in person primarily. So they did it all sitting around one big screen like this, with one keyboard in front of it, and everyone else sitting around like you are there. When I did it, we did it all over Zoom. So with Zoom, the driver shares their screen. So they've got the screen up, we're using a timer, and we're rotating that changeover every 20 minutes. So every 20 minutes, git commit, git push, don't worry about what's breaking, what's not. Then the next person pulls down, and they're ready to roll. They start sharing their screen, and we move over. We decided on a few rules up front, how we were going to do this, how we were going to run with it. We decided that we were only ever going to work with teams of 3 or more. So we didn't want to work with 2 people because teams of 2 meant if one person goes, one person's left on their own. Teams of 3 give you room for someone to drop out, go to the bathroom, go to a one-on-one, and still keep going. We blocked out time in our calendars. We blocked out 2 blocks of 2 hours at a time. So 10 till 2, 2 till 4, every day was mobbing time. That's when we worked together in a mob constantly. And some of you are sitting there saying, you just told me that that was 4 hours of meetings every day, constantly on Zoom. And I'm going to tell you that yes, it was, but no, it wasn't. It did not feel like 4 hours at a time sitting in a Zoom meeting. It wasn't that terrible, all hands meeting where you're sitting there bored thinking about what can I do tomorrow. This was 4 hours where we were engaged and we were really enjoying our work. People were free to drop in and out. So you had 4 hours there, but you weren't always there for 4 hours. Anyone could get up and say, yep, cool, I'm off for a coffee, back in a bit. or duck out to a one-on-one, duck out to another meeting, whatever they needed to do. But that time was work time and it was productive time. It wasn't that same meeting feeling you might be thinking when you think of 4 hours in a Zoom meeting. And one of the other rules that we at least tried to abide by was this idea of the most junior idea wins. So you've got a group of people, you've got a guy like me, been doing this 15 years, sitting around, and a guy straight out of uni. If he's got an idea and I've got a conflicting idea, we're doing his idea. If we've got someone who's quieter, we're doing their idea. The person who is least likely to drive things is the person who gets to drive things. Or drive is a bad word here, but gets to set the direction. Because you've got two options. Either it's a terrible idea, and so you go down a dead end, in which case everybody learns that it's a dead end and everyone grows. Or it's not a dead end, and you keep going because everything's fine. And again, I'm assuming you're all doing good work here. You're all using good practices. You're all doing small changes at a time. So if you're committing twice a day, if you're pushing that to production twice a day already, you're not going that far. If you're only going down a path for 15 minutes, it's really not that much of a problem. We all waste 15 minutes a day, getting coffee, looking at Instagram. I had a few experiences with this that were good, right? So it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but there are a few really good things. The first thing is better team building. I'm a really big proponent of this idea that in order to have a good relationship with somebody, you need to have 5 positive interactions for every 1 bad interaction. Positive interactions don't have to be big. Positive interactions can be asking about how their kids went in their sport in the weekend. It can be asking about what they watched. It can be just having a chat over things. Bad interactions, again, don't have to be big either. It can be, hey, I want you to make this change in a pull request. But by working together constantly, we regularly found that there was downtime. We're running a build and say, oh, how about this thing? What about that? How did you go on the weekend, etc. And we started to know more about our team, started to get closer, grow better as a group. And that meant that every time we needed to have one of those slightly negative interactions, we could say, hey, here, and you're just burning down on that good behavior, and it all worked really well. We got better as a team. We learned a lot more than just code, right? We wrote code together, sure, but we learned about each other. We also learned about how each other works. I would sit there, and whether it was a junior developer or a senior developer, we tick away and then go, hang on a sec, stop what you're doing. How did you just do that thing? That have a keyboard shortcut, a macro, something installed, and we all got more productive at using our tools by watching each other regularly use our tools. We shared those little things that you never think to share. You don't share that, hey, you know that you can hit Control-K, Control-S, or Command-K, Control-S, and it will save without formatting? Oh, now you know that. But that's not something you're going to stand up and say, hey, everybody, stop what you're doing. Here's a keyboard shortcut. You're never going to do that. But when you're mobbing, you have a chance to share that information, things that you never would have shared otherwise. We got better delivery times. We delivered more and we delivered it faster. I keep harping on about this because it sounds counterintuitive. You should be doing more work and getting more done, not doing less work in order to get more done. But we saw in our burn down times, our sprints, we were getting more done. And we're getting it done with better quality. How many times have you sat there in a pull request review, looking at it going, can I be bothered having this fight? Can I be bothered saying, oh, I would like you to make this change? Is it worth me burning some of that goodwill that I've built up in order to get this change through? And you say, no, it's not. I'll let it slide. And next time I come to work in this bit of code, I'll just make that change myself. I'll rename that variable. I'll do those sort of things. When you're mobbing, you can make those changes without having committed all the effort already. So you sit there and you go, oh, yeah, cool. Hey, do you mind just changing that variable now? And someone says, yeah, sure, no worries. And you're not burning down on your good build-up. You're not burning down on all that goodwill because it's just happening instinctively in the moment. You're learning to work together better. You're learning what each other likes. And the code base quality improved dramatically. At least that was my experience. Yeah, so we had more collective code ownership. So I talked a little bit about that, but we had more times where people, okay, I've worked here before. I'm not just going to leave that over to the back-end devs. The team I did this first in had back-end code and front-end code, and we had a couple of back-end devs like myself and a couple of front-end people. But as we worked together, I got more comfortable in the front end. They got more comfortable in the back end. And we didn't have this, oh, look, we've got to wait for Phil to be free before we can get that work done. And this sounds like a little tiny thing. We had more moments of spontaneity. I used to joke that I got a lot of work done in the kitchen. When I was working in the office, I would wait for people to go in the kitchen. I'd jump in and have a chat to them about something. Just some little shitty idea that's kicking off in the back of my head. Sometimes those ideas turned into major changes in our platforms. When working in a mob, we had that downtime where we're all sitting there on Zoom and say, oh, what would you think about changing this or approaching it this way? We could set up something in order to do this. And that resulted in us replacing entire parts of our system while mob programming. Because oh, we could do that. Actually, it wouldn't be that hard. We should just do that. Let's just off and do it. And all of a sudden, everything's coming back to better quality code because we're not afraid to make changes because we're all there deciding to make the changes at the same time. It's just about that effectively higher bandwidth communication by all being in the same room at the same time. But of course, not everything is good. Oh, sorry, and working together is not a meeting. Yeah, it's hard to get through your head until you sit in 4 hours of meetings and be excited to be there. Be sad when they stop. It's very different to sitting in an all hands or a stand up where you're wasting your time. So, not all good. I had some weird experiences. Work progressing without you is weird. When you're working on your own, and you stop what you're doing in order to go to a one-on-one or go and make a coffee, go for lunch, go out for the day. I finish at 4 every day. And other people finish at 6, which meant sometimes that mob kept going when I wasn't there. So the work that you're invested in kept moving without you. And that was a weird thing to get used to. It was fantastic. The first time you go to sit back down at your machine and say, okay, yep, I was working on that card. Oh, that card's done. Oh, I'll pick up that. No, the next one's done as well. Okay. All right, I guess I'll have to find out where we're up to. It's a bit of a weird and unsettling experience, but I think on the whole good. Explaining the work you did can be hard. So if you're used to saying, that's my work, that goes away because we all worked on it. So it can be a little bit hard to say, oh, this is only my work. As a team, you may need to start being conscious about saying, all right, we're going to make sure everybody raises pull requests so we can all point and say, yep, see, I did this work. Or if you need to track your work or be measured somehow, make sure that you are thinking about it. Driving is one of the hardest things you'll do, particularly as a senior engineer. So I've been doing this for 15 years. As a general rule, I'm one of the louder people on my team, even if I'm not loud in volume, my ideas tend to get heard. I tend to ensure that they do. But when you're driving, you've got to shut up. You have to listen. It doesn't matter if you disagree with what they're doing. You're driving. You're not making the decision. You're just typing. And that's a really hard thing. But I would ask you if maybe that's something that a lot of people who look like me and act like me maybe need to get a little bit better at doing. Letting other people's voices be heard. Stand up becomes less relevant, irrelevant, possibly. If everyone's working together on the same thing, you don't need to tell anyone. You all know what the blockers are. You all know what's actively in progress. You're all getting together. Maybe you no longer need stand up. Or maybe your stand ups become very, very fast as you say, if you need to give a status report to someone, yep, here it is. But I will talk to you until you're deaf about all the reasons that your stand-ups are currently terrible. I won't go into it now. The other weird thing is feeling like you're going slower, but when the metrics are all saying you're actually going faster. There's a whole bunch of conversation that goes on back and forward. You feel like you've got this low bandwidth communication. Oh, I could have just made this decision so much faster if I was doing it on my own. But then you look at the metrics and say, well, we got more done last sprint than we did the sprint before. And we got more done our velocity is going up, but we feel like we're getting less work done. What's going on here? And it's because you're not spending all that time at the end of your process. everything's actually getting to done. You're optimizing for completion. Nothing is perfect, and mod programming had some bad experiences for me. I truly believe that sometimes learning comes from sitting on your own, nutting out a problem, doing it yourself. And you need to find a space, and I found it's particular for the more junior developers. We needed time for them to sit down and sort of digest things. It can become very easy for junior developers to get used to always having a senior there, somebody more experienced who they can lean on. So I think there is times where you need to make sure everyone is off doing their own independent work. Quieter voices can be hard to hear. Again, we tend to have a lot of our discussions dominated by the same few people. If you think about your teams, if you think about when a question is asked, you know who's going to answer that question. Immediately you know that Klee Thomas, Mark Tranter, we're going to speak up and we're going to give you our peace of mind. You're going to hear us. But I worked with a lot of other people who were either English as a second language, junior, female, whatever the reason was, they didn't feel like they could speak up as much. So we needed to be very conscious to try and include them in a way that wasn't just, hey, you, what do you think now? Because we didn't want them to be a deer in the headlights. We wanted them to come along on the journey with us. And that's something you're only going to get to learn in your own team. It can be exhausting. Getting used to that constant feedback, constantly talking, is exhausting in its own way. But once you're into it, once you're excited, once you're going, it can be really easy to forget to take a break. All of a sudden, you've been going for 5 hours and you say, I really, really need to go to the bathroom. I haven't been to the bathroom all day, or I'm hungry, or whatever it is. You need to be conscious about splitting it up and saying, okay, we're going to stop. And again, this is one of those rooms where the louder voices can be instrumental in saying, hey, well, I'm going to go and get a coffee if anyone else wants to as well. And you'd find the team quickly went, oh, actually, yeah, disappear for a little bit, come back, and get back into work. Unfortunately, this does need buy-in. It's going to need buy-in from your team, because I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there going, I would hate that. I would hate to work like that. And you know who else thought that? This guy. I hated the idea. When my manager said, we should do this, and we're going to get Woody Zool into training, I went, oh, I did that a while ago. We had a crack at that once. It was terrible. I hated it. I don't want to do it ever again. But when the team bought in and we all worked in it together, we all found that it was very productive. It needs buy-in from management, because they're going to see you doing some weird stuff. Hey, why are you all in a meeting all day? Why is there less work in progress? What's going on? You're going to need to have that discussion with them, try and get them across the line. Finding the right team size can be hard. We had 10 people in our team. We split into 2 groups of 5. That worked pretty well for us. But I think the key team size attribute is how many people do you need in your team in order to make the decision. One of the things that might come up for you here that you might not want to see is that everybody might need that same one person in their team in order to make decisions. At which point, you've only actually got one big team anyway. It's just you've got all this work in progress, and that person's probably hating their life just doing code review all the time. Maybe you'll find that everyone needs the product manager in the team, and you may need to find ways to start splitting that out. Like a lot of things in good agile processes, mod programming is going to highlight where you're going wrong, not just make everything perfectly better for you. And finally, not all tasks were well suited to mobbing. At times there were small things that were much easier just to get done, one person smashing through them because it's all just updating one package version, something. But if you're finding that all of your tasks aren't well suited to mobbing because they're all very simple, there's a decent chance that ChatGPT is going to come and take your job away, because those are the sort of tasks that are easy to automate. So wrapping up, would I do mod programming again? Absolutely. Would I suggest mod programming to you? Absolutely. I think you should give it a try. But before you start, realize that there is going to be friction. This isn't free. Nothing's a free lunch. And when you change your processes, there will be times where you start having, you butt heads a little bit. But if you work it out, you work together, again, all of you are good people. You're all working with good people. You're going to find that you start getting more productive and you start coming together better as a team. Start small, this is going to be exhausting, it's going to be a change. So just do a few hours here and there at a time. Pick some cards there. For this task, we're going to mob on this one until it's done and get a feel for it. Pick the smallest group you want. As I said, my first team it was actually 9 people in it. And when we started with 9 people, we got nowhere. There was too many people, too many voices, too many times where people were just like sitting off to the side, not doing anything, because 9 people is a lot of people to communicate. We split down to 5. I think we could have split down to 3, but by picking the smallest group you need to make the decisions you need to make, then you're going to get more done at a time. And make sure you're rotating that driver often. The driving role is exhausting. It's the role people who are dominant are used to taking. Oh, I'll just share my screen and you can all watch me code. But over time, you're going to find that rotating that driver regularly and often gives you better performance. And that's really all I've got. I'm just going to leave you with the question, whether or not you want to consider mob programming. I want you to go to work tomorrow. I want you to sit there and look at the work you're doing, how you're doing it, and ask yourself, what is my team optimizing for? Because you are going to be optimizing for something in the way you're working. And maybe you're going to find that it's not really what you want to be. But thanks for that. All right. I don't know if we want to take questions. Just want to jump into Mark, let you go and grab a drink quickly. Stephen? Yeah. Yeah. Go, Steve. Go.
You said you went with the most junior sort.
So that's just so the people can hear on the live stream.
You said you usually went with the most junior or the quietest members' suggestion over. And then you also mentioned that it was easy to make changes, that you could just shout out changes. How did you balance between the two approaches?
Cool. Yeah, look, I will be honest with you and say that the junior idea wins thing is easy to say and hard to do. But really what I was saying when it's easy to just make changes is often those were the little changes. Those things like, oh, could you rename that variable differently? And the junior idea was more about an intent. How about if we solve the problem this way? How about we do this larger path? But again, if the junior really wanted to have a variable named one way, we could run with it and see how it played out. But yeah, it was difficult. I'm not going to stand up here and lie to you and say it's all sunshine and rainbows. It's difficult to try and find that balance between letting someone be stuck or letting a team be stuck and unblocking them preemptively. Saying, oh, okay, how are we going to make sure we optimize our learning, optimize what we've done well, and let the other things slip by.
Who's the user? Sorry, who's the user? Is the user a team name, or if you've got somebody, if you're rotating your through the driver's position, and what's going in, if you're using Git, what's going in the blame record?
Oh, it would be the person who was committing at the time, I guess.
At the time, yes.
So
honestly, there's no retrospective tracking on the basis of who's done what, so you can go back and say, here's the problem. So you've got to know who that person, which team that person was in at the time. Yeah, if that's something that's important to you, you need to find a way to solve that. Yeah. That wasn't something that was important to us, so it's not a problem that we solved, but it sounds like Matt's got a solution in co-authoring commits. It would be a problem you need to solve if it was a problem that was relevant to you. All right, I'll let Mark get on and have a go as well, but I will be around to answer questions, and I'm also always on Nui Slack. I never leave, so.
First of all, thanks, Klee. That was an awesome talk. I've been looking forward to that for a long time. So Klee and I talk about mob programming a lot. I'm also a massive fan. Before he came up, Klee said to me he was interested in what we disagree on. I don't think we disagree on anything. I had a bunch of questions, but they were mostly around what's our positive to negative interaction ratio?
All negative.
Mostly negative. Awesome. So thanks for having me, guys. I'm going to fly through this very quickly. Klee saved me a little bit because I'm totally unprepared for this talk. My name is Mark Tranter. I am the Director of Software Engineering for a company called V2. and I'm going to talk to you today about Amazon PDK. My background is software engineering, funnily enough. 20 years in tech, a bunch of languages, a bunch of cloud automation, DevOps, and probably for the last 5 or 6 years, platform engineering. PDK kind of bridges these gaps between software engineering and cloud automation and platform engineering. So who are V2? We are a digital transformation consultancy. We have offices in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. We're about a year old. We have design software. That's me. I'm the head of software. Data and cloud. And we are the Amazon, the AWS Scale Partner for Innovation, which is why I'm here tonight to talk to you guys about a product or a tool that Amazon use for getting products out the door quickly, which is called the PDK. So I'm going to fly through this. Hello PDK. What is it? Why use it? And try and demo something that I put together in the last, 48 hours that represents something that you may use in the real world. So I've got about 17 windows here, and I'm trying to hide my Amazon credentials from you all. Not that I don't trust you, but I know this is being recorded and you never know who is watching. So what is PDK? The PDK is like a software development kit that provides these Lego-like building blocks for putting your projects together. So for anyone use, well, first of all, does anyone use AWS? Sorry, SSW guys. Some people use AWS. Fantastic. Does anyone use TypeScript, JavaScript? Yeah. How about mono repos like Learner, PNPM workspaces, Okay, so PDK bridges this gap where we're bringing together multiple projects. We want to build a mono repo. We might have multiple front ends. We might have multiple APIs. We want to have them in the same repo, and we want to have a set of infrastructure that is deployed using best practices, best Amazon practices, and it's easy to use. So let's have a quick look at what that looks like. I'm leaning heavily here on the Amazon documentation. Here is the getting started page. Super exciting stuff. Boom, boom, boom. If you follow this all the way through, you'll end up building a shopping list application that looks all something like this, but luckily enough for all of us here, we don't have to go through that because I've put it all together for us. Sorry about the screens here. I've got a screen that's to my upper left, yet I have to drag everything to my right to sort of make it work. Okay, PDK demo. What we're looking at here, does anyone know how to bring up the File Explorer in Command who, sorry? I'm in a situation in VS Code that I've never been in before, where my VS Code, how do I merge these two windows? Anyone know? Let's just do this, eh? So at the core of Amazon PDK is this thing called ProGen. Probably no one has heard of ProGen. Anyone know ProGen? Okay, ProGen is a toolkit for constructing projects. So we all know about compositional software. We can put classes together to build systems. We can put databases and microservices together to build systems, but we can also build, for example, TypeScript projects together to build systems, right? So we can build multiple TypeScript projects. We can have a front end and a back end project. We can have multiple front ends. We can have multiple APIs. We can have multiple libraries. And that's what, at the core of it, AWS PDK sits on top of, with something called ProGen. ProGen is an open source project that allows you to build these Lego-like constructs that put your projects together. Let's make that real a little bit here. I want to create a mono repo project. Okay, to that mono repo project, I want to add an API project. Okay, now I happen to be a TypeScript fan. I happen to be a static types fan in general. So I'm going to use this type-safe API project with a bunch of settings. Okay, I'll come back to all this later. We'll deep dive shortly. And I'm going to have a front end, a website project, and I'm going to have an infrastructure project. So all in all, I've got a back end, I've got a front end, and I've got a way of deploying it. I want to prove that all of this works to you here today. So I am going to, with my credentials well hidden, I hope, deploy that. I'm not going to sit here and wait while that deploys. Does anyone use CloudFront? So CloudFront will take about 15 minutes to deploy, which will take up the rest of my talk. Needless enough to say that's going to just deploy, right? But what we've got is a type-safe way of putting all of these projects together. If no one's messed around with Learner or PNPM workspaces, or NX or Turbo Repo, or if you have, you'll know how difficult it is to strap these things together. What ProGen and the PDK gives us is a type-safe way of bolting these things on top of each other. If you think about Lego, right, these things just strap together really easily. You'll see that my API project and my website project and my infrastructure project are each aware of this parent project, right? They know that they're going into a mono repo. The infrastructure project in turn knows that it has a website project that it's going to have to deploy. It knows that it has an API project that it's going to have to deploy, right? At the end of the day, this is kind of like a code gen tool, but rather than generating code, it generates projects in their entirety. If I look into my packages folder here, it generates my API, my infrastructure, and my website project. And it generates them in such a way that they all reference each other safely. They know about each other's types. And what do I mean by know about each other's types? Well, I can come in and define my API. Some of you may know that Amazon use heavily this Smithy language. I can define a say hello API in Smithy. Doesn't do much. It takes a name and it returns a message, okay? So this is like a hello world definition in the Smithy language. When I run the PDK tool, this generates me a bunch of code. It generates me a bunch of handlers. Is someone going to do some pull-ups? Generates me some code. It generates me the entire project and the code to go with it. So here's my say hello API. This is going to go into a Lambda function, right? I still haven't thought about anything about Lambda functions. Haven't had to think about databases or VPCs or direct connects. Haven't had to think about anything. Part of the issue is, part of the way I define platform engineering, if you think of a platform like AWS, maybe a little bit more so than Azure, and definitely more so than GCP, AWS forces you to access a lot of the primitives, right? You're often talking about subnets and NACLs and security groups and the like. And platform engineering on top of that becomes a developer experience exercise of how do I bring these things together? How do I pull them together and deliver them in such a nice packaged way that my developers aren't afraid to use them, and that they aren't afraid to use them in that they offer the same operational and security, or the best practice operational and security benefits that I can get from AWS, right? Anyone can hack a VPC together, leave all your NACLs open, leave all your security groups on 000/0. Good platform engineering enables you to embed best practice into these. Amazon have a phrase for this, Andre, you might want to, undifferentiated heavy lifting. Undifferentiated heavy lifting, which is that part of writing platforms that isn't different across all platforms. You still want everything to be secure, you still want good operations, you still want good durability, and you want good monitoring. And so that's partly what PDK does. It gives you this higher level of abstractions on Amazon. So we've got an API here, strongly typed. We've got a website that you can see here, which is just a plain old React website. Anyone use React? Great, fantastic. So this is all bootstrapped for me, right? I have done nothing around this whatsoever. You'll see if I uncomment this, that I've got this strongly typed JavaScript code that is aware of what my API is going to give back, right? I've done nothing complicated there. I haven't had to write my own clients. I haven't had to do any manual code gen around Open API and the like. Okay, this is all out of the box. I touched nothing here. Now I'm going to let that keep deploying. As you can see, the CloudFront's still deploying. I'm going to let that deploy and deploy and deploy. And hopefully it'll be done by the time I'm finished, which will be 5 more minutes. That's where I want to be. That's the hello PDK part. Real world. What does this look like in the real world? Well, to be honest, as I said, I knocked this application up in the last 48 hours, but I'd like to think it's a relatively reasonable representation of what you might build. Why can I not drag this thing? A reasonably good representation of what you might actually build in the real world. So what I've built is a clone of the Newy website. Does everyone know the Newy website where you go to sign up to Slack? Yeah? No? Yeah? Fantastic. Let's say you do. I've built a semi-clone of that. I noticed in the news section this morning before Klee's talk, people talked about the V0 dev tool from Vercel, AI website generator. So this was built using that. I jumped into that Vercel AI website generator tool and I said, generate me a community website for Newcastle, New South Wales, where people can log in and view events and understand what the Newcastle tech community is all about. It gave me this. Now, obviously, I stuck that image in there. You can see here that these events haven't been touched. If anyone's on Newcastle Slack, you might have heard me complaining about how difficult it was to generate an image that I could use to go here that represents Newcastle and tech and our collaborative mission and our values. And this is the website that it drew up. Now, being a real-world application, this form actually does something. So you can see here that I've got a whole bunch of projects. I've used Progen, I've used PDK to generate all of these projects. Now I've used some abstraction here because I've been programming for a little while. I know about abstraction. I've got a types project that abstracts away my types, a meetup client to go and get the events, Dynamo to talk to DynamoDB, my public API that we're all going to hit shortly, my administrative API that you'll look at me demoing, my public website and my administrative website, and some infrastructure to deploy it all. Okay? So all of this sits in this project. I'm going to make this available on GitHub so you can have a deeper dive for any of you that are interested. And this is what it looks like. But I will, if you guys want to scan that QR code on your left, public app, feel free to scan the admin app. It won't work because I'm not the worst developer in the world and I've put some username and password in front of it. And when you can, let's make sure I'm not logged out of my own system. When you can you go to the form at the bottom and fill it out? Feel free to put in any details you like, swear words, invalid email addresses, well, as long as they pass regex. Hopefully what we should see is the system actually working. While you're doing that, I'll walk you through the way it works. So currently you are submitting a form from my web page generated by V0. You are submitting my sign-up form. Okay, sign-up form, bunch of markup, a bit of Zod for anyone who likes Zod. You can see here that I'm an AI-driven developer. And I'm using this API client to create a Slack invite. This is all strongly typed, okay? So none of these clients have I had to create myself, which posts a request back to my server, which lives in my public API. And this was all the scaffolding for this was generated by the Smithy. So create Slack invite, takes the body of that form that hopefully some of you have just posted me, otherwise this demo is going to be pretty lackluster. And sends that to my repository, because I've got a repository. This is all abstracted away. It's an interface, and it's classically over-engineered. But at the end of the day, my DynamoDB here will save this Slack invite using single table design. If anyone's interested in single table design, we can talk about that as well. Oh, look at you, good citizens. So we've got a bunch of people who have signed up there. Hopefully this, if it ever went into production, would make Klee's life a little bit easier, because it's his job to approve the Slack invite request. Now, I've never tested this, right? I've tested it for one user. Let's test it for multiple users. Let's see what happens. Did I even press that? Yep. Oh, look at that. And there's another one come in. Beautiful. That makes me happy. So what's happened there? It's called, I've gone into my admin web UI, which has also been generated by PDK, and I've used the same type stack client to go and get the Slack invite requests, which were in that table. I have a mutation client, which is also auto-generated for me, all strongly typed, and I'm saying, go and get the selected items from that table that you just saw me select, tick, 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 send them back to my API, which sits hidden away in my API project. Then approved, fetched them from the database and approved my Slack invites. All this probably took me about, in all honesty, about 3 hours. I had hoped it was going to take me about an hour and a half. It took me quite a long time, but given that I heavily use AI development and that all of this framework here, by the way, is called Cloudscape. It's a UI framework that Amazon provide. So all this fairly rich behavior that you can see in here, and I've turned a lot of it off, like filtering and pagination and table preferences, what columns do you want to see in the tables? I've turned that off for simplicity. But all of this comes from Amazon's Cloudscape UI framework that you get by default with the PDK. So all of this honestly took me about 3 hours to knock together, which I think is not too bad. If I want to go into my Amazon account, which I'm not going to do it. You'll see that everything's put together really nicely. I don't want to explore it too much. But for example, I've obviously got my Lambda functions, my API gateway, my DynamoDB tables. It's also put a WAF in front of all of my API to make sure that I've got a whole bunch of appropriate rules in front of my API. And there's something missing here. I could be in the wrong account. Wrong region, thank you. Yep, there we go. The new PDK, so I can see I've got a whole bunch of, this must have deployed. This must be the original. Oh, there we go, look at that deployed. Oh, how lovely. Okay, so you can see all of that deployed really simply. And if I was to put in some credentials there, or if I was to register that user with Cognito, and if anyone has ever tried to configure Cognito themselves, they know that the PDK is worth the price of entry alone just for configuring Cognito, because it's a bit of a pig. That it's worth the price of entry just to have PDK just to configure Cognito for you. But not only get that, you get these security and operational concerns already set up for you, like these WAF ACLs and the like, so that hopefully nobody can SQL inject you or Dynamo inject you or DDoS you, as the case may be. Great. I tried to make that as fast as possible. The footy is about to kick off. It hasn't already. That's me. I've got the link to the new PDK Git repo there. That's my LinkedIn profile, and that's me on the Newy Slack. There are two Mark Tranters on the Newy Slack. I'm Mark Tranter the first. So thanks very much for having me. Any questions, or you can ask them after I come down. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. Having them all in PDK, does that mean if I want to change, say, like a CSS class and a React component, or make a new DynamoDB table, I've got to redeploy all of my services? And is it all the same Git repo? Yeah, great question. I think the question comes back. Let me abstract the question up a little bit, which is use cases for PDK. When you talk about deploying all your services, I'm not familiar enough with the
PDK project at this stage to be able to give you advice on how to deploy using, say, microservices. If you wanted to selectively deploy services, that could be an issue. It does use something called NX under the hood, which understands what's changed and will only build and deploy what's changed. Well, sorry, only build what's changed. It is a monolithic infrastructure. The way I've got this set up is a monolithic infrastructure project. Just thinking off the top of my head, there's no reason you couldn't have multiple infrastructure PDK projects and use them, an infrastructure project each for each microservice, and do something funky in Git that you would do otherwise if you had all your microservices in a single Git repository. But to be honest with you, I would not necessarily at this stage recommend PDK for a large microservice setup. My gut feel is that it's quite good for small to medium monolithic applications, especially where you need, say, multiple front ends, multiple APIs. You can separate it out really easily, but still share resources, so still share TypeScript libraries. Something I didn't mention, I've built this with TypeScript, but PDK also supports Python and Java. Awesome. Thanks, guys.